Dan blew out a cloud of blue dope smoke that whooshed upwards without actually doing anything as energetic as whooshing, into the bank of blue haze that hung over the whole room about 5 feet from the floor, making little whirls and walls, like Shelley Winter's hair underwater, until the whole thing settled into stillness again. This smog belt would idle and drift in his room, moving through dream to dream, but never escaping its own atmosphere until somehow it went away somewhere. I was almost wistful, I can tell you. Where does smoke go, Dan? I remember once when I was a kid, I had a plastic jar with a fake wooden top to it, and I set fire to some paper and put it into the pot still burning and glued the top on. Glued it, mind, so the smoke couldn't get out. I left it for days, secret in my plot to keep the smoke prisoner. When I eventually opened it by smashing the jar with a torch, there was nothing inside but some crisps of half-burnt paper and a few dismal ashes. No clouds of smoke bursting forth, gasping for freedom or anything. It had just gone. Okay, the fire had gone out as soon as the oxygen was used up. There must have been some smoke. Where does stuff go, Dan? These were the kinds of things we amused ourselves with. Things that we knew they didn't have any answers. Same place as those goddamn ducks, probably. I sipped some tea in the hope that I'd forgotten how putrid it was. I hadn't. What would happen if everyone went round killing everyone else just to see if they could do it? Then I'd be stupid not to. This is one of my favourite answers, because I knew it would annoy adults. It's too democratic, I went on. You think you're Yozarian with a bullet. I mean, I'd like to kill someone, anyone, really, but it's a bit too dangerous. Maybe there should be a law where you get one bullet a year and you can kill one person once a year for free. Problem is, so can everyone else, so some kind of deterrent thing there. I'd probably exhausted myself by then. The Philosopher King's law. All drugs should be legal. The dope party line from Daniel. I'd make a law that there should be a new Olympic event where you have to run into a high wind with a mattress on your back. But you could get shot yourself. Maybe you could save up your bullets for years and do a rampage thing. What are we saying? People kill each other all the time anyway. That guy who killed 5 people because he hadn't got anything better to do and rang up the police to ask if he'd qualified as a serial killer yet. Famous for 15 minutes. Famous for 15 to life. The trouble is, it's too democratic. Everyone having the right to shoot someone. And the trouble with democracy, which is how I like to start a lot of sentences, is that it makes stupid people just as powerful as me. And stupid people kill people like me. Democracy should be based on responsibility and a respect for others, not welded to a system of arbitrary rights. Instead of here, I just forgot what I was going to say, and it was one of the major disappointments of my life. In Athens, women and slaves couldn't vote, said Dan, who was another one. He wasn't exactly political aware, Daniel. He thought the cabinet of Dr. Caligari was a government committee. Well, that's not democracy, is it then? Democracy is where everyone is the same in relation to the executive state, which also describes all the lefty stuff, like communism as I understand it, in theory, because in practice, under any system, there's always a flaw, inequality or something, and it's called people. But if everyone is the same, then you don't get greed and people can live equally. Grow out of that, for fuck's sake. That old human nature will change under different conditions crap. Hitler was democratically elected, you know. Do you really want a Millwall skinhead to have an equal say in the running of the country as you? When people are told they are as good as everyone else, what actually happens is they end up thinking they are better than everyone else. Why should they put up with any shit from anyone else? They invent rights to justify their own needs and actions. Americans all carry guns to defend their rights, so eventually carrying a gun becomes a right. Thus, I finished with a flourish, and I even did one. Actually, denying somebody's rights is a right itself. How? By shooting them to defend your own right. Right? Right? He laughed. Sounds like Socrates without the questions. Oh, wasn't sure what that meant. He had an irritating way of adding something to our arguments that I wouldn't have thought of, mostly because if I had, I wouldn't have risked saying it because I knew I didn't know what it meant, and this meant it could be true. After a while I said, I like the way they're called rights instead of wrongs. 2 rights make a wrong. Huh. His turn, I guess. 2 wrongs make a set. No, yeah. Language imposes value judgments on objects that affect our perception of their quality or worth. Yeah? This was 2 things straight out of a book we hadn't read past the front cover, and so terrifyingly close to a coherent statement that we both realised that we were way out of our depths. Depths? Dan stubbed out his joint and reached to roll another one. Comfort through ritual. I sat back and stared at the smoke while we both recuperated. On the kibbutz, people were jealous if somebody had a bigger TV. Either of us could have said this, and neither of us cared which one it was. We really didn't have any political opinions, apart from the vaguely formed conviction that politics was rubbish. There were people at college who read up on all that theory stuff and went through various stages, tortured by ethics and the best intentions they could find. We like to think we'd come to the same conclusion, only less painfully formed. Others kind of got stuck on one thing and glued themselves to it until they had to get a job or deal with the reality in some other way. These college revolutionaries tended to be the most rabid of the student body, and most of them seemed to drop the whole thing pretty quickly when they weren't students anymore. When Brian got a job with some company, he justified himself by claiming he was pursuing a classic Trotskyite individualist policy, which sounds like everything else that he ever did, lie and look after himself. There was one guy at college before us, a Nazi, a real one. He was in the National Front. After he left, the college did a survey of what their graduates did after college. Only 4 people from his course bothered to fill in the form, including him. So 25% of philosophy graduates that year were officials in the National Front. I looked at the pictures on the wall above the desk. I pointed to an old postcard shot of a French army officer holding a funny-looking xylophone I hadn't seen before. This is? Huh? This? Oh, what's it say at the bottom? I looked closer. Gamelin. He shrugged. Me neither. Daniel rolled his joint. I stared at the smoke gliding around the room. Some of the plants hung half in and half out of the haze like udders. But as soon as I thought this, I realised I must be bored. Not exactly a shock. As I pondered both these thoughts, and as Daniel added to the cloud, 2 rebels on the edge of dawn, I played at deepening my angst, because it sounded romantic and what the hell, I wasn't all that busy. What were we going to do? This couldn't last forever. Our middle-class upbringings wouldn't allow it. It was acceptable to doss around for a little while, misunderstanding books and learning the lyrics to hundreds of songs, but we were expected to break out of it sooner or later. We shared this expectation but failed to recognise how or when it was supposed to happen to us. Soon to be thrust into an endless new cul-de-sac, required to choose which rock we'd roll up what hill for eternity. It was taking all I'd got to deny the approach of reality. I sighed. The world really was a difficult place to live in, especially if you had to start living in it soon, and me and Dan were not exactly ready, willing or able. I hated everything, and Daniel had difficulty in remembering things, like speech or facts or socks. He had a theory that the memory could only hold a finite amount of information. When it's full, any new information displaces some old information. So if you're walking along and somebody shouts out something like, Cary Grant was a necrophile, you know, and you didn't know, you forget your own middle name or the capital of Portugal or something. Look at us, 2 young men, products of the great post-war boom, born white, male, Protestant, linguistically dominant and middle class in the West in the 60s, promised the world by the architects of the future, educated to the point of no return, mesmerised by the dual hypnotics of the pill and consumerism, polished with money, choice and power, 2 of the luckiest and most privileged people ever born, the chosen generation, and we couldn't make a puddle of piss between us. I didn't know where to turn, not that I'd looked, not that either of these was a coherent thought, more of an impression left in the sand as I rushed up the beach for another ice cream. Sunbathing too long, I had to face the shadows of life without a lifeguard or metaphor, simile, whatever. So imagine such a life, if it can be called that. Although if I don't do it, nobody else will. Born into plenty and the prospect of plenty more. Free health, free school lunch, yada, yada, yada. We had been assured of help at every step, but that had all gone. And now if we stumbled, we fell through the cracks. Our luck had finally run out, with the double curses of Thatcher and growing up. Someone sold a family silver, and all we'd inherited was an ill wind. What had been ours, we now had to either buy back from the state or go without, or enslave ourselves to credit and be grateful for the opportunity. We had always owned, and now we were owned. We had always belonged, and now we were belongings. We were always heard, and now we were herded. From free dentures to indenture in one easy vote. And it was our own fault. We'd cut our own throats with a few cut-price shares. We'd had a lovely war, lapped up the beer and skittles. Me, I'd been hiding at college, but this was the end of the road to freedom. I could expect no reprieve. Tomorrow, I'd be required to start contributing, start paying them back. I felt like a GI on D-Day. I'd been trained, prepared. I'd sat around on government time, spending their money, and now they were about to spit me out and chuck me in the deep end. Any moment the gate on the landing craft was going to drop, and they'd start mowing us down in columns. Life's not a beach, it's Omaha Beach.